I'm the cycling coach from Frederick County.
Ruth Vickers, Frederick County.
Uh-huh.
Zach and Cheryl Decker from Howard County.
St. Mary's on the phone?
Yeah, Stuart Hope from Garrett County.
Oh, a couple of Anna Rundle, right, and St. Mary's, Prince George's. Well, I guess we don't want to tie people up. I think it's pretty, you guys are all pretty experienced. I think we can do this in pretty short order. So why don't we just go right through. I believe everybody on the phone has been to Fort Ritchie before. So if you can just keep scrolling down, we're stuck on page 1. So I'm not sure how to move them, or that's you're in charge of moving.
Yep, so we can go right to the agenda?
Yeah, so let's just keep right on rolling. I'm going to cut to the chase here. We all know what we got to do. I think that overview, the 132 athletes, that's not for cycling, right? That's over for all the fall games, I believe, right?
Nope, that's people registered for cycling this year. That's registered
for congratulations, everybody. That's a lot of people.
That is.
So, yeah, we'll have our challenges. Okay, so that's awesome. We've grown a lot. Let's keep going here. So I just want a quick touch base on the schedule. It's basically what it was before. I think there was a typo in last year's stuff. The big thing I just want to call to everybody's attention is really giving yourselves, obviously with as many riders as coming, some of you have some pretty large delegations, to get there in plenty of time, unload, get your athletes in their clothing, because certainly, and we'll get to that point about, who needs to be dressed ahead of time, and getting to registration. And meanwhile, depending on your coaching staff and your volunteers, to be able to get the athletes out on the course and warmed up. And because they're really, much as I'd love to say, and it really isn't a 1K road race, that's supposed to be a time trial, so that's a typo there. But as much as I'd love to say that there's time, we all know that by the time we have our quick coaches meeting and all you guys are experienced, it's a little bit hard to get athletes out on the course. So I urge you to use that time from arrival time to, the coaches meeting to the time we get the athletes going. I don't know how many 1K riders we'll have. My guess is 20, 25, which also means staging takes some time. You will get in your packets, hopefully. I will be getting the start list ahead of time, and we run the athletes fastest to slowest. And so the numbers, because the numbers I think will probably end up being distributed by county, they won't be lining up in chronological order. You will have start sheets in your packet, and please help get your athletes, lining them up in the order of the number or the order of the, find out who the athletes' names are. A lot of the athletes, and help lining them up, because it's pretty much of a needs all hands on deck to get everybody lined up and going. For checking in and staging, we're going to use chip timing again, and all of you are familiar with this. I don't remember with this particular chip timer. I think the chip is on the number, but I don't recall. I believe it is. But the bottom line is that, just like for those of you who've been in Sykesville, your athlete can only collect one start number at a time. So when you first come check in, I would encourage you'll have a lot to do is get your 1Ks and your 10Ks and potentially any 2K who are not racing the 1K, who are 2Ks and 5s. You won't be able to get everybody's. You then kind of have to come up with your own system of removing the number from your athlete when they finish. Do not throw it away. You need to turn it in, and that's just the way that we're going to be checking off that we know that the athlete won't be using that number again. I know now why we missed a few athletes last year is because they used their number from their first race. And I cannot, even though chip timing works, if it's not programmed to the athlete for that race, it just kind of goes haywire and it gets weird. And of course chip timing could fail, so we use manual timing. So bottom line is, if your athlete is riding an incorrect number from the first one, they may or may not get scored in place. So I know it's a lot. You guys have a lot on your plate, and trying to track numbers and turning them in is always difficult, and I appreciate that extra task. But chip timing is the only way we can get fast and as accurate results as possible. So if that's the price we have to pay, I think we're all willing to pay that one. So that's, and obviously you can see it all. There's a lot of text here. I'm not going to read it. There, staging. Just listen to announcements, because we're going to, we'll be staging the 1K as quickly as possible so we can start right on time. We really need to stay on time. And potentially that means that we might stage the 10K even before we're finishing the 1K. We tend to do them in waves. How many waves we have on the course at one time, really, that course can handle a lot of riders. So I haven't determined yet. I just wait to see, what the start numbers look like and who we have. We do need to ask again, all of you are familiar with this, that the riders, the lap cards are on the lead rider on the course. So you're going to have riders who maybe be, 4 laps down. And as a coach, it's your responsibility to be sure your athlete, does the required distance. The officials cannot keep track of everybody on how many laps they have to go. So I know we had at least one rider who was pulled by a coach early last year. And I know it gets tricky because you have athletes pulling off, and then you have other athletes following their friend and pulling off. So, you want to be just past the start line to keep them going, and, bring an index card, bring a little notepad so you can keep track of them, because it is, depending on how many athletes you have, it can get confusing. So again, if the athlete doesn't do the required number of laps, it's tough. We will do our very best to have everybody go the full distance. I will asterisk that is that if we're having some time constraints and we clearly see that an athlete maybe shouldn't have been in that race to begin with, I'll work with the coach, and potentially that athlete might finish a lap or two early. Again, it's, we want to have everybody do the distance. So while we're talking about this, and I'm not surely where Adam brought this up to me, for next year to maybe think about having a longer distance race than the 10K, and I am all for that. But one of the things that we'll look at is times for the 10K this year, and potentially look at it, and just like we have done for World Games now, where we actually have instituted some minimum times for the longer distance races. So I don't know what that would be, but what we want to do is look at the longer distance race not as a grand fondo that they're just doing they're doing the distance, but actually that they have the ability to ride it at some level of speed. So I just want to let you know that if you have athletes who you think, and I can think of two or three off the top of my hat that certainly have the ability to go further. I know our athletes push themselves all the way to the end, but we will be looking at times and then having an invitational race potentially for longer distances next year. Let's see, again with the waves, we'll know ahead of time approximately how we're going to do the start, and if my guess is that we'll have a fair number of scratches and on the day of, and so the waves could change. So you need to listen to the announcements and be prepared for your athletes to move up fairly substantially from one start wave into another start wave. But we'll know that before the beginning of the race, but just so you can be prepared for what you see in the start list isn't necessarily how we're going to end up doing this. Staging, because especially we have so many athletes, staging is going to take a long time because we need to be able to start that next wave as quickly as possible. So depending on the weather, and no matter what, I'm sure it's going to be cool. I sort of doubt we'll have an 80-degree day, though, you never know. Plan accordingly, and we'll talk about clothes later, but, plan to have folks down having jackets and sweatpants or whatever so the athletes can stay warm, and then they can take the clothes off for their race. I think we're on this. We can move on. So I'm not a great one to look at Google Maps, but I think everybody's been at the Fort Ritchie before, so you can see sort of, I guess, where we'll be, but it should be essentially what we've done last year. And if we want to stop here, if anybody has any questions. If not, let's keep rolling. Warm up. We talked about this before. I would love to see athletes getting out on the course and warming up. Really, and if your 1K athletes are really slow, then plan accordingly, or if that's all they can do is 1K, then maybe they can't do too much warm up. But certainly all of them should get around the course at least once, and your 10K riders definitely need to have some more time on the course. So my guess is most likely it's our 500-meter only athletes and maybe a few of those who can't go around the whole lap. But just plan your time. We all know that as athletes ourselves that we do a whole lot better in our events if we're warmed up. And while I don't think I got to this on the slide, but we'll go to the next one and maybe it'll come out here. So rules, again, we're using the UCI USA cycling rules, and pretty much they're all the same. The only Special Olympic rule that is a standout is not athletes take their hands off the bars. We won't do an instant disqualification. So usually it's somebody who's doing a little hot rodding, and we'll certainly give them a warning. I can think of a couple of athletes who like to do that, but I think most of the part our guys are pretty good, and our girls. Again, we talked about this, riding the whole distance. The whole disqualification and honest effort rule. It's very difficult to take times from all sorts of different courses and plunk people into definitive groupings at this event. So if there is somebody who really does perform way outside their normal performance in terms of, they're in a slower group, and because of whatever races they've been, Sykesville is hard, maybe it was windy on the other ones, and they end up going faster, they potentially would get moved up into another division. And then potentially we won't have the capability of, we don't have a lot of, staffing to be able to move people on, but at World Games, what we do is, and they were doing qualifying right there, is when someone goes fast in one race, they instantly get moved up into another division. So again, as coaches, feel free. I don't really want to use the word protest because I find that that's kind of an adversarial word. But if you see there's an athlete from another county that now, because of their time, that they really have outperformed and they should not have been in that division, I encourage you to bring that up to, I'm not sure, one of the staffers, and we can figure that out at the meeting, and bring that up to our attention so they can be moved to another division. So I hope you'll look at this all as the collective fairness rule rather than one that's disqualifying. And if we want to stop here, if anybody has any questions. And again, I don't see it as a protest, but rather, hey, so Sammy really went fast and really shouldn't be in this class because look at his or her time, and we move him up. Anybody have any questions or issues about that? Okay, next one. Again, this is just more of the venue information. We can keep going. Food, you know me, my pet peeve here. You guys, tough thing is there are no concessions and places to kind of fill your tummies and your coolers right there on site. So I'll start at the bottom. Please let your spectators, family, friends know they need to bring food. There is a quick mark right near the gates driving in on 550, so you know you can get something. If it's cold, please coaches come prepared with some hot stuff. You know, I found some electricity around, so you know, I actually plugged in, brought my rice maker last time and had hot soup. So you can be creative. My concern is for the athletes that you've all had breakfast pretty early in the morning to be driving the multiple hours from your various locations to get there. And they don't start racing until 10 o'clock in the morning. So, you know, plan your food accordingly. Pretty much around 8 o'clock, 8:30 when you're arriving, it's probably a pretty good time for them to have another snack. It's a very long time to go from breakfast to lunch. So I would just walk in that, and, you know, I know you're all great coaches, but to work with your parents and other folks to be sure they are, you know, having some kind of good breakfast in the morning. If you can get them to eat some some protein with their oatmeal, that's great. If you can't, you know, hide it in something else. I don't know. You know, and just some ideas of some things to bring. I mean, sport bars, bananas, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, Fig Newtons, and, you know, fill the soft drinks for later. So I have to say, if you have an athlete who's dragging in the afternoon, nothing works better than feeding them a Coca-Cola about 10 minutes before they start, and they'll feel a whole lot better. So Coca-Cola is a drug. It's a legal one, and use it as you need for your athletes, but if they are drinking all that sugar before, they get a sugar high and then they get a sugar low. And I don't think there's any hot coffee on the place in there either, is there? So
I'm going to double check with the facility about their concessions, but at the moment, I do not believe that any concessions will be open at Port Refuge.
we need some Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to come out and sell coffee. So we can move on. Inclement weather. So cycling is rain or shine. That's a very safe course in the rain. The only reason we would delay or not be racing would be thunder, lightning, and extreme winds. So if it's raining, be prepared. And I don't see, I mean, this is an all-weather course, so I have no concern with athletes racing in the rain. I mean, if we have 40 degrees and pouring rain, I think then I would add a temperature factor in it, and I think then we're probably getting into a little tough zone there. So just because our athletes are out there for a longer time. Anybody have any questions or concerns regarding the weather issue? Okay, move on. Clothing. Again, you know, I think some of our athletes are wearing underwear in their shorts, but many of them are not. The bottom line is, it's a very long day to be in chamois, and I can appreciate that you might have to have them dressed in shorts coming, just because, especially the athletes who are racing right off the bat, it's too complicated to have them changing. Your 2K athletes who are racing later, if they're not racing the 1K, I would encourage them not to come in shorts unless you're going to get them on a bike right away. The biggest problem would be if it's going to be raining. you're going to want to get them out of those wet clothes so they can get in dry cycling clothes for their next event, because there's some pretty, big chunks of time. And that could be a problem for some of our athletes who maybe only have one pair of shorts. I don't know. But, watch the weather and just sort of think about that. Again, with depending on the weather, I sort of doubt it's going to be a hot Indian summer day, so I'd love to have it be, decent. But regardless, almost everybody, if it's a normal fall day, should have some sort of undershirt under their jersey for temperature. If they're wearing a cotton shirt and they're getting hot and they're getting sweaty, then you need to change it out. Cotton t-shirts are really pretty bad. I know some of the athletes have, what I call athletic. They're sweat absorbing and they're a little bit warmer. There's thin undershirts, but again, not everybody has that. So you just want to think about how to layer your clothing. And if it's a little bit cool, sometimes putting the jersey over a light sweater also works, rather than putting a bulky sweater over the jersey. You guys have nice jerseys. We'd like to be able to see them. If it's warm, if it's cold, keep the athletes warm. If you can keep the body temperature up, if you have to put them in the cars and stay warm, if you can keep the core temperature, it's a whole lot easier than, being able to get them to race. Once they start getting cold, and I know I'm one, I simply can't race. Have them warm up with their warm parkas on and their jackets. Depending on the temperature, and no matter what, I think Fort Ritchie at 8:30 in the morning is going to feel quite chilly. Encourage them to have, hat and gloves, and I wear my little neck things and I keep my ears warm, but hands, neck, head is a good way to stay warm and not get cold. And I saw a lot of parents shivering last time, so I have a feeling somehow that it's a little hard to get our athletes to be dressing correctly when the parents can't even figure out what to wear on a cold day. Coaches, you're really doing a lot, so I encourage you to stay warm, as overdress. You can always take your layers off, but I hate to see cold coaches because you guys do a lot. Sweatpants are the easy ones to wear for the athletes to bring, because easy on, easy off, and they can warm up with them. You don't have to worry about too much. If a little grease gets on a pair of sweatpants, no one's going to, not going to be a big problem. Any questions on clothing? Keep going. Race number placement. So we're going to have the left side of the back. You can see the picture in the webinar. And one of the things that you can see is that the number is laying flat. And the little holes in the numbers, I call them decoys. Ignore them. Your pin goes through the paper twice. And it's not just about a fast number, but it also keeps it from flapping, and a lot easier for us to see if it's actually laying flat on the back. So what that mostly means is it's more than 4 pins, but 4 pins pinned to a paper twice will keep it a whole lot flatter. So one of the things that we have to look at is the athletes who have alternative bikes, recumbents, some of the upright stuff. That we have a variety of different bikes. We need to look at to see what's a good way, where does their number go. It obviously can't go on their back if we can't see their back. So if you have any questions, ask me, ask somebody else, and we can be sure, because we couldn't see numbers. And then as the day goes on, or even beginning when it's cold, we had athletes who didn't have their jackets, who had jackets on. So again, if we can't see them, we can't score them, even with the chips, because if the chip goes down, we don't have manual scoring. Are we at more slides?
Yep, the next slides are just the general fall sports information. So pretty much the next following slides, those are the slides that are going to be talking about what's going to be happening at Mount St. Mary's. I know that we're, all cyclists here. We're all going to be at Fort Ritchie, but just in case anyone decides to venture out to go over to Mount St. Mary's to see the other sports, to see any other athletes participating, we have the following information right here. I'm not going to spend so much time on these slides. We're going to post them online. I'll send them out, and then the recording will also be on our YouTube channel, and I'll also send that out in an email as well. So I'm not going to spend so much time on these. But again, I'll be sending this information out, so feel free to go through these slides. One thing just to note, the opening ceremonies at Mount St. Mary's will begin at 9 o'clock in the morning at the Knott Arena. Lunches there will be served or delivered at approximately 11 a.m. Hospitality will also be going on from 10 to 4.
Hey, Nat, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just one point of emphasis on the food and the lunch orders. The lunch orders for every venue, including cycling, were due to the state office today. So if you do not go out to talk to your head delegate or your county director, make sure you do so tonight and get that form. We've got to fill those orders and get them to Mount St. Mary's first thing in the morning.
And did you include, we have 2 officials in that order too? Did you figure out for volunteers, or how do you do lunches for them?
Yeah, we've got a separate order for volunteers that Natalia and Jeff will take care of. This is just for all the delegation, the official registrants for each delegation, the athletes and coaches.
Okay.
All right, moving on, just more information about opening ceremonies, what time people need to arrive to be, whoever's part of the parade for the opening ceremonies for their delegation. Again, this will be sent out later this week, so feel free to go through these slides, the last remaining ones here. The overall event schedule there at Mount St. Mary's. And then this is just the overall layout of the campus, where things are going on, like tennis, powerlifting, running, and flag football. Okay, now I'm going to open up the floor for any questions. And again, if you don't have any questions at the moment, but you do tomorrow or the following day, feel free to either email me or your regional sports directors, and they are listed here on the slide.
This is Steve. I knew there was one question earlier in regards to the address for Fort Ritchie. I will go ahead and give that to everyone now, so I'll give you 5 seconds to get your pen and paper ready. And please know that the event guides will be going out in the next day or two. Cycling has a specific event guide, and within that event guide, the address is also listed. But for now, I want to go ahead and give this as the question was asked right before we got started tonight. So, the address for Fort Ritchie is 14421 Lake Royer, R-O-Y-E-R, Drive. That's in Cascade, Maryland. 21719 is the zip code.
And Natalia, you'll include that in the email when the slides go out too, correct?
Yep, absolutely. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns or anything that they want to bring up right now? Okay, if not, I'm going to thank Tracy Lee for presenting the webinar tonight. Thank you guys so much for listening in. And yes, I will be getting out this information this week, and I will include the address again for the facility within that email. And like Steve mentioned, the event guide will be going out for cycling this week, along with the event guide for Mount St. Mary's with powerlifting, flag football, tennis, and long distance running. So thanks, guys. Thanks for listening in tonight, and thank you, Tracy, for helping to present.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.